Ladies and gentlemen, hello there. Welcome to the Touchdowns All Day with John Barber podcast. We're back again. Second episode. We're going to drop this one right away. This is our attempt at a public service announcement. We have on the show today Vik Sobti, executive producer of the podcast. Vik is a doctor. Vik has run an entire hospital. Vik heads a telemedicine company focusing on radiology. Vik's wife is head of neurology at a hospital in Chicago. They are really, really deep in the medical business, and Vik wants to come on and talk about COVID-19. Most specifically, for a while, they thought his wife had it. And Vik has children. And so a lot of what we talk about is what to do when you have a household and someone in the household is positive for COVID-19. It ends up that she was symptomatic of flu a little bit, but didn't end up testing positive for it. But they did have a time period of about 10 days where they had to behave as if she did, because that's the way this kind of stuff works. If you think you have it, you have to kind of behave as if you're positive and not try and affect other people in case you do. And they did that. And so he tells us that story. So this is kind of an interesting take. I know there's a lot of COVID-19 facts and fiction out there. This is very fact-based because Vik's in the medical business and knows what he's talking about. And I just think it's an interesting take. How do you get tested if you think you have it? What are the symptoms? And what is it like out there to be tested? And what do you do in your house if you need to quarantine yourself? And what do you do if in your house you need to quarantine someone else? So really on message topic on the podcast here. And we're going to just pump this one out and get it to you guys as quick as possible. So this is the Touchdowns All Day podcast for everyone listening. If you want to be part of the conversation, use hashtag Touchdowns All Day on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. We are Touchdowns All Day on Instagram, TDAD Baby on Twitter. And we are brought to you by the Osiris Podcast Network, osirispod.com, which has also been releasing a ton of great podcasts into the quarantine. So people are getting a lot of podcasts from Osiris. I'm glad to be contributing to that. People are also getting a lot of concerts from the Disco Biscuits. There is a Friday and Saturday virtual tour going on nugs.tv where you can buy the whole tour for $150 and you can buy each individual show for $10, I think. And you can just go to the show on Friday, Saturday night. These shows are from the archives. It's video we've never released. We've had it for a long time. And it's really great stuff. Last night was a New Year's Eve 2001 show where we did a bunch of Star Wars songs and we flew people around from the ceiling and had Darth Vader fighting Superman on stage, and the band was playing some crazy music and everybody was all dressed up. And it was a very unique concert in the history of the band. And you can go watch that right now on nugs.tv. This is our virtual tour, so anything that you put in, if you pay $10 to watch last night's show of the New Year's show to see all that craziness, the money doesn't just go to the band, it goes to the crew, it goes to the administrative people, it goes all to people in the Biscuit organization so that everybody can pay their rent during COVID-19, which is the big goal here. And you know what? I'm impressed. We really raised a good amount of money for everybody. So I want to thank everybody out there who have been part of the virtual tour, anybody who bought virtual tour merchandise, anybody who was on the Zooms with us watching the shows as they happened. We really appreciate everybody contributing and being a part of our virtual tour because these times, it's hard for there's everybody to make ends meet, and it goes a long way for a lot of people. So thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it. We also have merchandise coming to Touchdowns All Day. So sometime next week, there'll be some t-shirts and some stickers and a dope bathrobe, of course, and a cool jacket and stuff with our Touchdowns All Day logo on it, which will help support the Touchdowns All Day team because those guys need support as well. And we have a nice team here, and we want to keep everybody together during the quarantine, and we want to pump out a bunch of podcasts because things have been going great. You know, we have a lot of podcasts coming out right now. I'm going to put them out on an ad hoc basis, as we talked about on the last episode. That was episode 26 with Evan Winokur, manager of the Disco Biscuits. He also works at Full Stop Management, and they handle Dead & Company and Lizzo and Travis Scott and all these other huge artists. So it's crazy to be with them. And you can go back, if you have tickets to a Disco Biscuit show that's been postponed, you should listen to the episode 26 with Evan Winokur episode, because he talks about what you should expect with your postponements. I think it's towards the end of the interview, but if you're wondering if you have ticket stubs for a show that, you know, didn't happen for whatever reason, either Mark's Corona or the world's Corona, well, he explains how the postponements work and how your tickets are good and stuff like that. So really great conversation there. And today, episode 27, we have Vik Sobti, and we're going to have a really interesting, introspective conversation about COVID-19, living with someone with COVID-19. And I didn't know any of this stuff. So thanks, Vik, for coming on the show. And here, we're going to get right to that. We're going to listen to a song first, because we don't want to get too crazy in the medical stuff right away, because this is kind of a music podcast. So I'm going to throw a jam on that Rich Deal chose. We're going to listen to December 5th, 2001, Reactor Crickets. And this, Rich says, is one of the great Reactor Crickets. And I know what this jam is because I remember this jam specifically because I walked off stage saying I didn't know what key the band was in, because I kept thinking we were going to another key. So this is an interesting jam where people in the band literally think we're jamming into. I thought we were jamming into a different song than the other guys in the band thought we were jamming into. And sometimes you don't want to go look at the set list because you're busy playing. And so this is one of those jams where nobody looked at the set list, and we just kept pulling each other towards different songs over and over again. And it created this incredible tension, and, you know, it just exploded at the top of it. So I know what jam this is, and I'm glad Rich chose it. So we're going to get into that right now. Real quick, the sponsor of the week is Grey Star Collective, Grey Star Collective. They're a CBD startup based out of Denver, Colorado. They specialize in sourcing all organic, superior hemp products. Smokable hemp, pre-rolls, edibles, tinctures, topicals. Let Grey Star Collective be your one-stop shop for the best hemp products on the market. All their products are dosed accurately and effectively, which is super important. And, you know, it's great for a variety of ailments. So follow them on Instagram at Grey Star Collective for product updates. And if you want to see the list of everything, like if you're home and you like CBD products, all you got to do is shoot an email to Ryan at greystarcollective.com. That's it. Just say, hey, Ryan, hashtag touchdowns all day. Send me the product list. And he'll shoot it over to you, and then they'll get it to you in the quarantine and all that fun stuff. So thanks, guys, for sponsoring us during the quarantine. We appreciate it. Let's get right into this episode. Vik Sobti, medical professional.
We're mass communicating. We're mass communicating. We're mass communicating.
Folks, we're back. What a beautiful podcast. What a beautiful day in California. It seems like maybe the earth needed a break from all the pollution, because it rained for the first 4 days, maybe 10 days of the quarantine. I mean, we couldn't believe it. It never rains in California that much. Really, maybe for a week in January, but that's about it. And in March, it was We saw hail. It was raining every day. There was just water falling out of the sky for days and days and days, and it was unusual, I gotta say. It was really unusual. And now the rain has let up, and it's just beautiful blue skies, and I'm reading all these reports about how air pollution is falling drastically, and the greenhouse effect and all the climate change issues are just, alleviating a little bit, let's just say, because it's probably so far along. But it is a nice break from Mother Nature, and a lot of people die because of pollution, apparently, from complications due to air quality and water quality. And it's, one interesting thing about this quarantine, because the quarantine sucks, let's face it. But it is interesting that if you're not dealing with this virus, like if you're a pine tree or a crab or a lobster, like you don't really care about the virus. And as weird as that is to say, and the world is kind of cleaning up a little bit. Mother Nature is like sweeping out some pollution and processing some stuff a little bit. I think it's just a big advertisement for electric cars. I mean, how great would the world be if we just had more electric cars? Get rid of these gas guzzlers and get to a world where cars are quiet and don't make weird noises all the time and don't pollute the sky, and we can still move around. So let's all go buy electric cars tomorrow. All right, here we go. Reactor Crickets, December 5th, 2001. I mean, you gotta like this opening, right? This is a band that wants to play some music. I like this already. mean, what a catch right there, right? The chromatic up, don't know what to do with that. Then a chromatic down, like just pulling on the whole sound. Crazy guitar tone in this one, right? Very, very like I'm playing the whole solo on the wah pedal. Do you guys do that, guitar players out there? Do you play an entire solo jam section on a wah pedal? That's crazy. I forgot I used to do that. I used to do it all the time, and this is a perfect example of why. And you get that like searing shred guitar at the top. I mean, you always kind of want to adjust your tone. So why not just leave the wah pedal on and just adjust your tone the whole time? And I guess for a while I was feeling that vibe, and it is a unique sound in itself. It's pretty cool. I mean, this groove is pure fire right now, you know? It's fast, but this drum beat that Sammy's playing is just like pure fire. I mean, it sounds like a programmed beat into a computer. It's so precise. That fill was crazy. Craziness. Total craziness. Gotta love that. Gotta love that 2001 insanity that we were on when, you know, that was the craziest band in the world stuff. We were all about that back in the day. It's just like so unhinged and crazy. It's really fun to listen to. unbelievable playing on that one by everybody, but really, Sammy was incredible. Brownie was incredible. Just unbelievable stuff, note after note. Really great to listen to. All right, folks, that's our jam for today. We're going to jump into the interview with Vik Sobti, executive producer of the Touchdowns All Day podcast, and also a medical professional with quite a list of credentials. Also on the interview is Crunk Mike. So the three of us talked on a Zoom one day, and we recorded the Zoom. So it's going to be a different quality than you're used to on this podcast, but the content is great for just kind of wrapping your head around what it's like to be symptomatic for COVID-19 and what it's like to live with someone who might be symptomatic. So check it out. It's not that long of an interview, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. And we're going to drop another episode right after this. So quarantine release style is a lot of fun. Here's the interview, guys. Welcome on the show, Vik Sobti.
Wear mask, communicate.
Here's what we're going to do. So, for like 2 weeks, actually 10 days, we thought she had the virus. The way it works is that the healthcare systems are overwhelmed, so they don't test people right away. So they assume you have the virus for the first 6 days. And then when they have the rations for the testing, they give you the test and you don't find out for another 2 days. So she effectively for us and for the world had the virus for 10 days. We found out it was negative, but we didn't do anything differently than what you would do if you had the virus. So for 10 days, we thought she had the virus. And as a frontline healthcare professional, you assume to have the virus if you have a contact who had it, and she did.
Okay, so
effectively, she did for 10 days. When we found out she was negative, that's a good spin on the story that my wife won't die. But,
yeah,
I can speak as though we had it, what to do if you have it, how to treat yourself if you do have it, and essentially from there, go on, right?
Okay, so so basically you guys behaved as if she had it, but doesn't she have to have symptoms? If
Correct.
You're thinking, are you like, oh, you have it? What were the symptoms?
So that's the problem. So wait, should we just begin on what it is?
Sure.
What are we talking about?
Let's talk
Okay.
about for people know. So let's do the short version.
Right. So this is COVID. The reason we call it COVID is because it's a corona type virus disease in 2019. So it's effectively called COVID-19. And the reason we call it that is because proteins on the head of the virus look like a crown or a corona, right? This is not the only coronavirus we've ever had. There's been SARS, which is severe acute respiratory distress syndrome. There's been MERS, which is Middle Eastern, etc. And these are all animal-borne illnesses that then switch hosts to humans and cause severe respiratory problems, right?
They jump the species gap. And
that's where they think we got it. So in China, they believe that it was carried by a bat, and somehow it jumped species to the human, and then Wuhan effectively spread it to the United States and around the world.
Okay, so let me ask a quick question.
Of course.
Did it jump from a bat? There's so many conspiracy theories about. I heard that there's the coronavirus manufacturing plants are in Wuhan. Is that true?
So we do know that in southwest China, it started in the province of Wuhan, or in the city of Wuhan, in the province of.
That's where the 28 days later quarantine occurred.
Correct, and they effectively. They have isolated that a similar virus exists in a bat. So we assume somehow, we don't know how, if someone ate a bat, if a bat infected someone by biting them, we don't know how, but we're assuming right now that it's coming from a bat species.
So we can basically say to all the people there, and literally every Uber driver I've talked to are all fairly convinced that the bat thing is just a tall tale, and there's some kind of nefarious pharmaceutical building that's manufacturing COVID-19, and they lost control of it, and one of their people walked out infected and they didn't realize it. That you're saying, no way, somebody ate that soup, that's that.
Yeah, correct. Or, a better way to put it is, if you have COVID-19, you're effectively Batman because you've eaten or been bit by a bat. Take it for whatever you'd like. Right. Except in this case, you don't fight crime, you could die.
I mean, look, if you are Batman, you got to save up and purchase the light before you can really do it.
That's correct. That's correct.
Now, let me ask you real quick, Vic, before we get too deep into this. Why do you know this stuff? You want to tell people who are watching a little bit about your history and what's your training? What's your
Sure. Background is I am a board certified radiologist. I trained in Chicago, Illinois at Rush University. I did my fellowships at University of Chicago. I ran a small hospital here in Chicago for 2 years. I was the head of a teleradiology company and still am the head of a teleradiology company. I've been in the medical world for the last 10 years. I'm also, which is a passion project, I'm an executive producer on Touchdowns All Day. I am a big fan of the Disco Biscuits and everything that John has put out. But more importantly, the reason I'm so sort of versed in the coronavirus is because, number one, my wife is a physician and frontline fighter of COVID-19. And number two, there was a brief period in time where we thought she might have been exposed and had the symptomology of COVID-19. So I took it upon myself to sort of understand what COVID-19 really is, and more importantly, what to do if you or a loved one have it, because I think it's important for public health and public safety that we're all sort of informed, because misinformation can be as dangerous as having the virus itself.
So yes, let's just pause, everyone watching. We want to add to the information flow a little bit. Vic is an expert, and he also was in a situation where they believed that his wife had it. So he would be living with someone on a day-to-day basis, has the virus, and we're going to talk about that here on the show. We're going to find out what Vic did, where his mind was at, and what it means if you, in fact, do get the virus. What are you going to do? What's the right thing to do? Or, what are some best practices, some precautions to take? So let me start with this. Why did you think your wife had it? What happened?
So, and this is important to understand in why we're seeing more and more areas of shelter in place. So my wife is the head of neurology at the largest public institution in the Midwest, if not the world. Being on the front lines as a healthcare professional and having symptomology of a cough. So coronavirus, just backing up for a second, is a lower respiratory disease. It affects your lungs and predominantly your lower trachea, rather than your upper respiratory symptoms like a nasopharynx or having sniffles and things of that nature. So it's different than the flu in that it affects your lungs worse than it affects your head and your body. One of the symptoms of COVID-19 is a bad cough, shortness of breath, bad cough, a loss of breath, dyspnea, or unable to catch your breath on exertion. She had come down with these symptoms after they thought that someone from the area within where they had quarantined people in China had been. So having a known contact plus having sort of the symptomology, you would assume that someone would have COVID-19. Now, the reason that you would assume is because, not to get political, but we were woefully underprepared for testing in the United States to prepare for COVID-19. The testing needs to be done by an FDA-driven, and I can't stress this enough, by an FDA-driven laboratory and test device, and it runs a PCR. So what they do is they take a sample from your nasopharynx, they stick a long swab in the back of your throat, they swab it around, and then they put it on a slide, and then they send it away. And in 2 days, you find out if you're positive or negative for coronavirus. And that process usually runs the course of 10 days out from when you started symptomology. So for effective 10 days, you are assumed to have COVID-19 or coronavirus.
All right, there was a lot to unpack. There's a lot going on. So you're saying that, was your wife in China?
No. So she is a doctor and someone who she was treating within the hospital had a exposure in China.
Okay, so they had one infection in the hospital, and
Correct.
Suddenly everybody in the hospital is high risk at that point.
Correct, and that's the way it's sort of even now, that if you're a frontline sort of fighter of COVID, whether it's a nurse, whether it's a physician, whether it's whatever, if you have symptomology, you're assumed to be exposed in this day and age. Certainly in New York, certainly in California, certainly in Washington State, where it's worst to have a background of COVID. But I want to stress this because it's very important. Of the 100% of people that may carry COVID, right, which is around the world, I think it's like 600,000 people. 80% of them show no symptomology, right? And then 20% of them, that leaves 20% that'll either show symptomology. But of that 20%, 19% of those are just cold and flu-like symptoms. So you have a cold and the flu, you could theoretically have COVID. But the biggest...
What did you just say? I have no idea. It was 74% of 20% of 19%.
Right. If I had 100 people that tested positive for coronavirus, 80 of them would show no symptoms. You'd be normal. You live your life normally.
And then you're saying of that 80, how many? So 20 of them are what? Coughing all the time, or what?
So 20 of them, correct, have symptomology of the flu. Coughing all the time, short of breath, they can't catch their breath. Fatigue.
I heard that was like the first symptom, like somebody, you can't hold your breath for 10 seconds. And if you can't do that, then that's like the first sign.
Sure. And the thing that makes this difficult is there's many diseases that are kind of around just normally that have a cough, right? There's the rhinovirus, there's the flu, there's tons of stuff, right? So again, of those 20% of people, if you think you have a cough and you're worried, you need to quarantine yourself, because what we're worried about is one person out of that 100 has an immunocompromised state, is older than 65, has comorbid diseases, diabetes, etc. And when that happens, we're essentially saying that they don't have the same ability to fight off the disease that you do. And that one person may end up dying. And that 1 out of 100 is 10 times more likely to die versus the regular flu. So that's why COVID is so important, is because when you get the flu, 99.9 of you will not die. But when you get the flu with COVID, one of you may pass away. That's what's so scary about COVID.
And is there truth to this? People under 60 getting the virus, finding out it's a little bit more intense than they thought it was going to be, and also at risk of dying.
They're at risk, but less likely to die. But again, we're not worried about death all the time. That makes it a pandemic, which it is. The problem is it can become so severe of a disease that you need to be on a respirator or a breathing machine. And when that happens, we're overwhelming the hospitals, which we can't have. I want to say one important thing. For whatever reason, this coronavirus has zero effect on anyone under the age of 8. We haven't seen anybody under the age of 8 affected with coronavirus. So while it's important to understand this is a very dangerous disease, we need to learn more about why it's not affecting pediatrics and maybe use them as a way to combat the disease. So little River over there, he's in the clear for now, but still we'd like to maintain our quarantine ability.
Little River's like, just fell asleep in tummy time, and now he's like, where am I? I was doing tummy time and then I fell asleep. And now I'm awake, and what are you doing?
Babies hate tummy time.
Yeah, he hates tummy time, but he likes a little exercise in the early morning, afternoon. There he is. So he's like, Vik, what are the chances that mommy or daddy get COVID-19 now that they're quarantined?
So that's a great question, Riv. You're a smart little boy, and I'm so proud of you. You're going to grow up to be a great guitarist or a doctor. I think that the chances are low, and that's the reason we have this quarantine in place. And that's the reason, unfortunately, we had to, cancel the Disco Biscuit shows. We had to cancel, a lot of other events. Sporting events have been canceled, and people are quite angry about that. But if you're in a big area where there's, thousands of people and in close proximity, the disease can spread very fast. And that's the way it's spread, right? It's spread via respiratory droplets. So that little droplet that you coughed out, someone can breathe in and then they can get disease. The reason we're trying to keep everyone quarantined and keep everyone sheltered in place and locking down areas and canceling shows, unfortunately, in our case.
So your wife's in a high-risk situation.
Correct.
She shows some coughing, some symptoms, maybe dealing with the virus on a very low level, not really sure.
Right.
And she's head of neurology at a hospital, so you figure she'll be able to get a test like that, right?
Like that, correct.
So how does the testing work? If you think you have it, from average Joe all the way up to head of neurology, what's the process?
So, and that's the scary thing. So we, have trained here in Chicago, built our careers here around Chicago, have a lot of friends here in Chicago that are very powerful in many different ways for different hospitals. And we even at that point had to call in all of our favors to get the testing. So we know that there is this was again 2 weeks ago, and I want to compliment America on its call to action and testing, which is now more readily available. But 2 weeks ago, there were rationing tests, and only one hospital in all of Chicago had the test. Rush. It was called Rush. And we were lucky enough to have trained there. Our friends are heads of services there. So again, we had to call in all favors to get that. And again, that's more about preparedness than it is about what this virus is. So we called in all of our favors. My wife, this is day 6. And at the time, again, we didn't know what was going to happen with this. We know a lot more today than we did yesterday, and then a lot more yesterday than we did the day before. We were under the assumption that we were at 15% of people who have this disease dying, right? So,
and that's crazy, right? That's crazy.
It's an insane number. That's 15 out of 100 people are dying, and that's not. And thankfully, the more and more we're getting testing and more data we're getting back, it's more like 1, and it may go down under 1% of people who have the virus die. The difference is that if you think you have it today, first thing you need to do is think about the public health and safety concerns. Please, please, please wear a mask to keep respiratory droplets away from other people who may be immunocompromised or maybe older.
Let me dig into that.
Sure.
So I was at the airport the other day, and I was wearing a mask. I was accosted by a grouchy old couple who told me that my mask was a waste of time and I looked like an idiot. Is that true? Are they right? I mean, obviously I looked like an idiot. They're right about that. But are they right that the mask was doing me no good at all?
Not to throw shade at you, Barbara. You're a great person. But the truth is regular masks do not stop virion or viruses from getting around or spreading. The actual mask you need is a specialized fit test mask, which is in high demand now, but really reserved for healthcare professionals. That being said, it will decrease the transmission rate. So if you're coughing and you have the disease, a lot of the respiratory droplets can be contained. So no, you're not an idiot for wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. They're more of I don't want to call them idiots because that's a little rude, but they're more on the side of ignorant because they're the ones, if they're over 60, are at risk. If they even catch any form of virus, it's more likely that they're going to have a far worse time than anyone under 65. So no, wearing masks is still a way to spread respiratory droplets, number 1. And number 2, the best way, and again, this goes back to abstinence versus, protection, stay away from people. Quarantine yourself. If you don't need to do something and conglomerate as a group, then don't. And, we can bend the curve of spreading that way.
Okay, so agreed. I should have told them, you guys are at risk. Would you like my mask or something like that? So how did you end up testing your wife? What was the test you did?
So day about 6, she's got symptomology. We're calling all sorts of hospitals and friends, and we end up, getting through to Rush because we've obviously have a history there. And we tell them the story. My wife has most likely is a frontline. There's people from China who've gotten here now have a flu who she has been in contact with. And they say, yeah, you're more than likely to need the test. Mm. So they ask you to drive by yourself. I'm not allowed to go because I'm a risk for getting contaminated along with her, even though, I've lived with her. We're trying to quarantine her as best as we can. And we'll get into the quarantine and how to do that. She drives by herself up to Rush. There's a little circular driveway. They say, leave your car there. And everyone who comes to get her, there's a nurse and another nurse. So 2 nurses, they're masked completely and fully gowned and gloved. They walk her into a certain area, which is like a tent. They take a long sort of swab, stick it as far back into her nose as they can, swab around, put her on a PCR, and then walk her directly back to her car and in the car, and she goes. So it's essentially a drive-through test. And weirdly enough, that sounds overkill, but it's the best way to, number 1, make sure no one in the hospital has that contact, because the people in the hospital are at high risk. They may have cancer, they may have, just had surgery, etc. But number 2, it also keeps the healthcare personnel more likely to stay away from getting the disease.
Right. She's not walking past the front desk staff or the security.
Or sneezing on, the potato chips there either. So.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And those potato chips are readily available other places.
They are. And, all kinds. Barbecue, sour cream.
That's kind of like, how are you supposed to get tested?
So, I mean, today is a little different of a story. This was 2 weeks ago, and we've done a great job in we collectively as healthcare professionals and as America to make the test more readily available. If you are demonstrating signs and symptoms of COVID-19, contact your primary care office first, please. Don't overwhelm the emergency rooms. Your primary care is the best way for them to triage you at this point, to tell you sort of what they think it is and how bad or how severe it is. And if they're telling you,
what does triage you mean? No one ever explained that to me.
So triaging in the healthcare world means really prioritizing and getting you away from taking the time and efforts of people that should be focused on things that are much worse. So it's a good way to prioritize what you have, get you before you see and use goods that are necessary for other people that may be in a worse way. Okay. It's a good way for them to sort of pre-see you, if you will, and then make sure that you're in the right area.
Okay, so let's get back to your wife. She's in the car. She's driving home. She just had a huge swab inserted into her nasal cavity, removed. I guess there's a lot of brain cells on there or something that they get.
Correct. Yeah, they went up into her brain and swabbed around her brain.
They swabbed her brain, and then she drives home, and then she shows back up at the house. What do? Do you have a tent in the garage that she lives in for the next week? What do you do with her at that point?
So we created a small tent city.
Into it.
I have a tent. I don't know why people, there's a lot of campers watching this right now.
That's
sure
right.
They have tents. What's the correct thing to do? She's exhibiting symptoms. She's high risk. She has the test. How long is the break between testing her and receiving the results?
Great. Actually, testing her and receiving the results is about 2 days for the normal person. Because she's a frontline healthcare professional, it's only 24 hours, which is good. Because they need to know, has she infected other people, or, is she a high risk, et cetera. She's a much higher risk than other people.
They can get it done in 24 hours.
24 to 48 hours, and that time is coming down actually, which is great. And every day, we're making more strides to get the test more readily available and more quickly done, and then the test results back more quick. For what they suggest you do is you come in, you leave the clothes, like if you have a jacket in Chicago, it's cold. You leave the clothes in the garage if you can, if you have a garage, or at the front door. And then you walk directly up, and then you take those clothes off. You put them in the washing machine, wherever you can, run up, and you take a shower. That way, the respiratory droplets via antibacterial soap won't live. The heat of the shower can take them off. And then you go back into your quarantined area. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means, a quarantined area. She doesn't live in a tent, and it's not as though I'm gown and glove, but using separate bathrooms if you have the ability is very important, because that's where most of the respiratory droplets are probably going to live. If it's on your toothbrush, they can spread to another toothbrush. If you're coughing, it can live on the porcelain surfaces for a long time. So different bathrooms, wipe down as much of the areas as you can with Lysol and other
stuff you can
commercial disinfectant wipes. And then most importantly is continually wash your hands as much as you can, because a lot of times when you're coughing or when you're sneezing or when you do have contact, the virion can live on your hands, and that will otherwise, you can touch your eyes or other surfaces, which can cause the transmission of disease.
So is that it? Separate bathrooms? Do you sleep in the same bed still? Do you separate bedrooms?
If you are within the ability to, you should be sleeping in separate bedrooms. Again, coughing, respiratory droplets, if you're in the same bed, there's a good chance transmission of disease will happen, whether it's on your pillow or the other one.
And dinner time, do you eat dinner separate places as well? So you basically just separate the house or something?
As best as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, I want to go back to this. People of younger age are not at risk of death, if you will. So, and I don't want to use that term lightly because it's a very serious disease, but more than likely, it's the elderly and it's the immunocompromised. So the reason for quarantine is we don't want her to infect me and then me to go out and infect others, right? Yeah. So we do our best to help the public. So by the 10th day, when we found out she actually did not have the disease, and spoiler alert, she's happy and healthy, and we're lucky enough that it came back as negative. But
wait, how'd you get to 10? Wait, you went from 24 to 48 hours to 10.
Right.
What's that process?
So again, she showed symptomology on Monday of a week. Through the week, she was told to stop seeing patients. And by the following Monday, she said, you're still, coughing, you're short of breath, it's difficult for you to catch your breath. We think because of we have rationed tests, please come in and get tested. So by Tuesday, she got tested. And then on Thursday, she found out she was negative. So from Monday, when she first exhibited symptoms, through Thursday, when we found out she was negative, we assumed she had it. And we assumed that she was passing on the germs to me, or the virus to me and my children and my dog. And I was effectively trying to quarantine myself. So because I'm also a physician, I don't want to go out and see patients. So the problem is dog too, exactly.
They can't get it, right?
They can, and they can also spread the disease, which is dangerous. Now, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it where it affects dogs, but people often can.
Fido can give me. I can go over so if I go to a friend's house and I'm just like dropping something off, and I want to do as little as contact possible, and the dog runs up to me, I should like get away, Fido type of thing. Like I didn't realize this was possible.
So. We also have to be within reason. This is eventually.
I don't know if anybody knows that.
Yeah, nobody knows that.
I'm just pretty sure, they're like, yeah.
Well, the problem is to what end? We're not going to be quarantined forever, right? We can't. Okay. We're going to be flying by April or May. I hope. Mm-hmm. And the virus, even if it has one host, can spread. So we've got to have the whole reason for this sort of shelter-in-place lockdown is so that we don't overwhelm hospitals. And I think eventually, this is going to be a 2 to 3 year process where coronavirus is going to be spreading across the country, just slowly but surely making its way, similar to how the flu does each year. And we don't know if it's seasonal. We don't know if it's, if it can live in different hosts, if it mutates to different viruses. There's so much we don't know yet. It's only, essentially been around since December or November of 2019. It's only 6 months old and it's already shut down our economic system. So, this is a lot worse than we think, but we don't know.
Okay, so let me ask a question. Speaking of that, so you're showing symptoms, you get the test comes back positive. What's going to happen to you next? How long of a process do you have? What do you have to look forward to with the symptoms getting worse, or what happens next?
Great question, because this is a very important one. So what we've learned from all of the patients who've had coronavirus is that for the first week it starts with, as Krunk said, shortness of breath, where you're unable to hold your breath as long as you want. And then eventually it leads to a cough by day 4 or 5. And then you're coughing pretty badly. It's a wet cough. And then by day 6 or 7, you get a little better. And that's called the lucid interval, which can be very dangerous because you think you've beaten the disease. Mm. And then on day 8 through 9 or day 9 through 10, you all of a sudden understand that you're even more short of breath than you originally were. And we've seen a huge spike in patients coming back in the second week that now need respiratory ventilation. Literally, they put a tube down their throat and there is a machine breathing for them. So it's a waxing and waning disease, which can also have a lucid interval where you think you're getting better, so you don't think you have it. And then all of a sudden you show up to the emergency room and you literally can't breathe for yourself. So this is a lot different than SARS, because SARS was just a linear curve where you're getting worse, where you need to be respiratory ventilated. In this case, you go up, you go down, you think you're better, and then all of a sudden you're in deep trouble.
Okay,
so symptomology can be sort of misleading.
You go up, you go down, you think you're healthy, and then you act normal. Maybe you compromise your immune system a little bit.
Correct.
And boom, it comes back. And next thing you know, you go to a hospital and there's no ventilator. You could be in some real trouble.
Real trouble. And the problem is we have about 50,000 ventilators across the country in hospitals worldwide. If this is a medium spread pandemic, where 1 million people are infected, which is, a very real number, it's 328 million people in America. We could easily see 1 million infected. We need 64,000 people on ventilation. We don't have that. So that's the reason we're sort of worried.
What is a ventilator? Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. So a ventilator is a machine which essentially breathes for you. It causes positive pressure going into your lung. retracts the carbon dioxide out of your lung and keeps your pressures for your lungs and oxygenation of your blood mechanically done. But that requires an intubation tube, a tube going down your throat into your lungs. It also requires you to be sort of unconscious. It more than likely is placed in an intensive care unit where it's closely monitored with pressuring, and it's a very, very significant burden if you need to be ventilated.
So if you're conscious and awake, how would they hook you up to a ventilator? What's the process there?
So if they determine, and they being, healthcare professionals, please don't assume that you need to be ventilated, obviously. But emergency doctors, pulmonologists, critical care doctors are wonderful healthcare professionals in hospitals, have seen, needing ventilation time and time again. And they'll tell you, and they'll be sure to understand who needs it, who doesn't. And most importantly, they'll be able to tell you, this is how we're going to do it. They'll more than likely give you some medication that'll help you relax, put the tube down your throat, and then hook you up to a ventilator. But those are reserved for rare cases, and I don't want to scare anybody, but if you do have shortness of breath or cough and you feel that this is something that's worrisome, you may have a sick contact that has COVID-19, it's important that you do get tested.
If you're a young person, you're coughing a little bit, you feel like, okay, I've been in some public spaces, I've been in a lot, I haven't washed my hands a lot, I've been in a lot of contact, you feel like maybe you've done some, high risk situations that might cause the cough to be, in your mind, maybe symptomatic. Do you go to the hospital, or what do you do then?
So again, the first thing you need to do is if you have a primary care doc, internist, whoever it may be, family physician, you call them up and say, look, this is my symptomology. This is who I think I've been in contact with. I've been out there. What do I do? And that physician who's been trained, to understand your symptomology with COVID, to understand how severe your symptomology is, your age, if you have other diseases, whether it's diabetes, cancer, other things, they can make an informed decision and tell you, in my professional opinion, which is all it is, I think you should go to the emergency room. I think, you've been watching the Disco Biscuits. Someone you knew had COVID-19, you were dancing with them, they coughed directly into your mouth, now you're sick. I think it's important that you go to the emergency room. I think you need to heed their advice. I think you need to go to the emergency. I'm not saying Disco Biscuits have that, but I think you need to heed their advice.
Earlier off the call that if you're younger and you have a cough, just self-quarantine.
Correct.
Climb into bed for 2 weeks and, just binge watch Spaniels or something.
So the reason that you need to get tested is because you need to know, number one, do you have it? So number two, are you going to spread it to others, right? That's the real reason we want to know who has it. And that's the real reason we want to quarantine you, because if you assume you don't have it and you go out on day 7, if you're assuming I'm healthy, I'm young, I'm 20, I don't have COVID-19, and you go out and you cough on an elderly patient or person, at the airport, as you did, John, there's a good chance that they may not have the same immune system that you have, and there's a good chance that they can't fight it out. So we're just looking out for the good of the country rather than just.
I mean, it sounds like you had to pull every string in the, you had to get
correct.
Your wife tested.
You're right.
How does Trump get tested if he wants to get tested?
They want to get tested.
So I want to reiterate. When we first came down with this was 3 weeks ago now. We've made a lot of strides in 3 weeks. Tests are far more readily available. Back when we did this in early March, this was March 1st. There were not as many tests as there are today. Now we're flooding the market with millions and millions of tests from Korea and China that have dealt with this before. So there's more tests available. One thing I will urge you is that, please do talk to your healthcare professional, because you may have symptomology that's not like COVID, but you think you do. And one thing we got to sort of curtail is the emotional contagion, which is what it's called, where the anxiety of having COVID-19 is going to overwhelm our healthcare professionals worse than the actual disease itself, right? So anxiety, depression, and all that stuff is really going to be a problem, because we need resources of those healthcare professionals to take care of people with COVID-19 rather than people who think they do. So again, going back to Mike, I've been coughing, I'm short of breath, I'm young, I've been quarantined for about 5 days. I've called my healthcare professional or urgent care, and I've said, look, things are not getting better, I'm very worried. They're going to urge you, yes, go to the emergency room. This is signs and symptoms of COVID-19. We need to know, number one, if you have it, can we quarantine you and don't go out for 2 weeks? Because remember, you have to go to a job eventually, right? And everyone on your job may not be of a certain age to fight this off. So if you're going to stay home for 2 weeks, I don't know many jobs that are going to say you have self-quarantined yourself and we're going to let you off for 2 weeks. You need to go to the emergency room to get that test to prove that you have to stay home from work, because we'd rather have you not work and infect less people.
So what are we waiting? What is the future of humanity in a post-COVID-19 infection world? Is there a vaccine? Does this happen every 6 months? Is it going to go away like SARS did? Or is it going to be like the flu where it's all the time? Or is it going to be some kind of other thing that we haven't seen yet?
So, yeah, I couldn't answer that. Anyone who says they can't. But here's what I'll tell you is that we've seen this 7 or 8 times before. SARS, MERS, Ebola, H1N1, swine flu, bird flu. It happens. And the problem is that while I want to hope that this becomes better and it's just going to go away like the other ones did, you can't run public policy on hope. So my guess is that in 2 weeks from now, when shelter in place is put throughout the country, we're going to see how this curve of spreading the disease is. We're also going to have more widespread testing, so we'll know the numbers of death, we'll know the numbers of infection versus who has it. And then from there, we can make a more informed decision. Now, if I were to make an opinion, I'm guessing by May, this sort of levels out. So March is now, April is going to look a little worse, but it's going to start getting better and better. And then by May, we're going to actually look like less people are infected day after day after day. And then from there, we're going to go back to life as normal. And I think by July of 2020, we're going to look like it was a big scare, but things are sort of back to normal. I think flight is going to be opened up. I think cruise ships can be opened up. I'm hoping that concerts are put back on. And it's just something that we need to know that we should learn from rather than react to. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think it's going to be okay. I think the long term is going to be okay. And while there are going to be people that pass away from this, we're going to learn how to protect ourselves a little better.
So what are your thoughts on Camp Bisco Music Festival, Scranton, Pennsylvania, mid-July, camping festival, 25,000 people? Is that going to happen? Water park, is that just the kind of festival that in this environment we need more time for, or should we buy our airplane tickets now while they're cheap?
I think July to put on a festival, while it's probably fair, I would think August is a better time. And I would think September is even better than August. And
so you don't think there's anything to this stuff that I've been hearing, which is in the summertime it's hot, viruses don't survive in the heat, coronavirus isn't in the equator, it's not down there. So as it gets hotter this summer, we're gonna have the virus is gonna be kind of eradicated by that. Could come back in the fall, but won't be around in the summer.
We only know what we've seen, right? We're learning from history, and all the other viruses we talked about today have actually followed that same pattern. So theoretically, you are correct. July there's far less cases. This was a seasonal virus. Winter, our immune system is naturally low. And are you asking me would I love to see Camp Bisco on July 12th or whenever it is this year? Yes, 100% yes. And I think there is a chance. At this point, I'd place it at 50-50 that the virus is seeing less people each day. We've got an appropriate response to that. And if you wanted to make that jump, you could in July. Do I think that people are still going to be gun shy? Yeah, 100%. So do I think that the population of people, of concert goers are going to go down? I do, but I think that's going to return to normal. I'm hoping, and I'm very hopeful that even by April or May, we see that the cases each day are going down. And if that were the case, then I would be all behind the July. This was a seasonal thing. It's gotten better, and let's go.
Is it possible that if we over quarantine, we won't develop herd immunity, and then we have a situation where it will come back, and it could come back and be just as bad, if not worse, than this original outbreak?
That is a very valid point, and that is what Britain actually just passed recently. Is they're going with the herd mentality. Allow us to spread the disease, create an create an immune response to the disease, have antibodies similar to what your vaccine is. Create a vaccine and we're done, right? The problem is that if you do that, the number of sick will go up too high in America versus, for instance, in Britain, and we will overwhelm our hospital. So I think they're trying to do that, but in a contained amount. So every 2 weeks, we're going to let it out and then quarantine again. And every 2 weeks, and maybe that will go on for maybe a month. And then after that month, then enough people have spread it where we have a good vaccine virus, a good response to it.
Wow. Here you are, folks, just listening to us talk about what is affecting the whole world, the coronavirus.
I can't believe I'm on this.
I can't believe that you're such an expert on this. What a resource you are. I think, you know, you're the Dr. Phil of the Touchdowns All Day.
That's what I hope to. Look, I also, please put this out there. If anyone has any questions or needs to speak to me at all, you know, my Twitter handle, Vik Sobti, please give out my email. I'm happy. Look, the Touchdowns All Day community is a family to me. I really believe that. And, you know, I'm obviously very intimately involved. The Disco Biscuits community, very intimately involved, very happy to be part of that. And more importantly, I'm happy to spread whatever I can or any sort of advice you have or any questions you have. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm available, as Crunk and, you know, Barbara know. I'm just here to help. You know, we're all in this together and we're going to make it through this together. So it's the only way to do it.
All right, folks, you heard it here from Vik, executive producer of the Touchdowns All Day podcast, and actually a teleradiologist and
That's
doctor,
right.
And his wife is head of neurology at a hospital, and they've been through this a little bit. If you get a chance to watch this in full, please do watch the segment and, you know, let us know how you feel. Send us an email at podcast@touchdownsallday.com or hashtag Touchdowns All Day on Twitter or Instagram, and we'll shoot back to you. Talk to us. Let us know how you feel. Thank you, Vik, for coming on. Thank you, Crunk Mike, for putting this together. And we're going to wrap this, right? We're going to put this on the YouTube page and maybe make a podcast out of this too, because it's very informative.
Thank you, guys.
All right, boys.
We're mass communicating. We're mass communicating. We're mass communicating.